Hey y'all, it's Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am coming to you with a weekly reading vlog. And as you might can tell by the return of the Squid Game sweatshirt, it is chilly outside. It's cozy. Daylight savings has happened. It's getting darker earlier. And thus Jenny is coming into her own. As we turn from fall to winter, I'm just a happier person. My enjoyment of life kind of goes up in the wintertime. Winter is my favorite season, and so I know a lot of people have seasonal depression. For me, that kind of hits me in the spring. So this is kind of my favorite time of the year to be reading, and it's also just in general my favorite time of year to be vlogging because we are transitioning into the Christmas season. Sadly for me, I'm one of those people who this year decided that November 1st, it was the start of Christmas season. I don't make the rules. It's Christmas. You know, honestly and truly, if it makes you happy at this point and it doesn't harm other people, I'm all about that. And for me, Christmas makes me happy. Fall also makes me happy, but I just feel like I'm kind of in the Christmas spirit a little bit earlier this year. So I'm thinking this week we might look around, go out and about, see some Christmas decorations, go do a little Christmas shopping, Christmas decor shopping mainly. Since I got these new shelves, I do have Christmas decor that I normally put up in my bedroom, but nothing on the scale that would really decorate these shelves. So I kind of am on the lookout for that. But basically, I just really like to go out and get in the hustle and bustle. That's a key part of my process. That really helps me get into the spirit. So basically, I just want to kind of go out and see what people have. Otherwise, we are looking semi at a little bit of a busy week. We have some family things going on, but we also have the delivery of a new oven because prior to going to Italy, I went to Italy last month. Me and my mom went together. And before going, I was baking up some stuff specifically for breakfast just so that no one had to cook anything right when we got home. And I was thinking, oh gee, we're making so much progress and we're being so smart by pre-cooking. And so I made some pumpkin muffins. And then we also made like breakfast cookies, which is one of my favorite things. It's just like peanut butter, oats, nuts, chocolate, basically anything you want to put in there. And I had made those muffins and I thought to myself throughout the process of their cooking, like it was taking a really long time for them to get done. I was constantly checking them. I was constantly like putting a toothpick in them and it was coming out wet. And I thought, what's going on here? I felt like it took them a really long time to cook. And then later in the day when we made the breakfast cookies, the oven just never heated up. It never preheated. But that was just kind of one thing on top of so much that we have been dealing with in the past 4, 6, even 8 weeks. That was just one more thing. And so the oven is not getting delivered tomorrow. It's getting delivered the day after. And so I need to be around for that. So that'll be exciting because once the oven comes in, I am ready to do some baking. I am ready to do some cooking. But let's talk about reading. Let's talk about really why we're here. So I am reading, I think at least 3 different books right now, which is insane and is really just not feasible. So I would like to finish one of those. And I think the main one that I want to focus on this week is a book that I probably can't finish over the next few days, but it is the book that I am the furthest in, and that is The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. Yes, this finally happened basically because I was looking back at years past and I realized that I had read a Dostoevsky in November every year for the past couple of years, and I just felt like I wanted to do it again this year. I feel like it's kind of a tradition. I think November is an ideal time to be reading Dostoevsky, and really this was the last big huge one that I had left, and I was far more interested in reading something substantial than in reading something shorter. I know I lied and I said I was going to wait until the end of my journey with Dostoevsky. I was going to read everything else that he wrote before I dove into this one because this is his last published novel, but I just couldn't wait. I am 324 pages into this. I am almost at the halfway mark. And I started this last week when we just got home from Italy and I was really, really sick. And I was miserable for that next week. And I just thought, what better time to dig into a 1,000-page long classic than when you're in the midst of a brain fog. This really probably wasn't the ideal book to be reading, but I was a little bit in a slump after reading some really great books on vacation, and I felt like this was totally different to everything else that I had been reading. So I felt like this was kind of a good one to read, and I also thought it would be a project because I decided to annotate it. So I am really having a great time with this. I'll say at this point, I kind of have mixed feelings, and they're mostly positive. Like, I want to say that right off the bat. For the most part, my feelings on this are really positive, but I feel like this book is described in a certain way, and that's not necessarily what the book is. I feel like the tagline that I knew for this is that a father was murdered and one of his sons did it. Really, though, this book is so much more than that. It's basically all about religion. At this point, to me, religion and Christian theology and just arguments about religion, to me, that's the point of this book. And at this point, I don't think much in the way of a plot has even occurred. I also don't think much in the way of characterization has occurred. I'll tell you something that has really helped me with this is that before starting it, I tried to binge watch some videos about the Brothers Karamazov, and one of them I watched was by someone who I don't think is a booktuber. And he had a lot of things to say that I thought were very interesting. Some of them I thought were kind of on the pretentious side. Basically, he was saying that, like, you had to journal and you had to write down your thoughts in order to even vaguely understand this book. And I think if you want to do that, that's great, but you absolutely don't have to. But one thing he said that was actually really valuable to me is that he talked about the fact that the characters stand in for certain philosophies and also certain ideologies. And so they're always going to take a certain side in these debates and in these arguments. And that has really aided me because I'll say, going into this, if I hadn't had that on hand, I would think the characterization was really rather poor. And one thing that I'm really enjoying are these philosophical and religious debates. To me, they happen with little to no preamble. It's not like there's something leading up to it, just someone will decide to start talking and they get up on their soapbox and talk for 20 minutes straight about religion, which I'm all for, but I kind of feel like is not really connected to what's going on in the scene. It doesn't really feel like there's a proper lead up to these moments, which I think is interesting. I'm reading the Constance Garnett translation. I think it's really beautiful, but I've said in the past, I enjoy her translations. I particularly enjoy her translations of Dostoevsky. I think she does him very well, and I think her translations are really beautiful and really quotable. I have been doing Instagram updates on this, so I can insert some of those clips. Okay, people who have read The Brothers Karamazov, this is gonna sound crazy, but I've gotta go on and put this out there, okay? I'm 300 pages in. The Brothers Karamazov are giving the Sons of Ragnar, okay? I need my Vikings fans out here telling me which brother represents who in Vikings, because I can give you my breakdown. Dmitri, I hate to say this, I think he's Uba, and Uba is the love of my life. Uba was my son of Ragnar. Sadly, I think he's Dmitri, and I know Dmitri is only functioning with a single brain cell, but I think he's Dmitri. I think Ivan is Vitserk. I'll die on this hill. Ivan is my favorite of the Karamazov brothers, but Uba was my favorite son of Ragnar. And Alyosha, yes, controversial, I'm gonna say it, Ivar the Boneless. The passion, okay? The passion, the complicated relationship with the father, it's giving everything to me. We are missing Bjorn, but I feel like there's an illegitimate Karamazov brother who's gonna give me Bjorn. Okay, y'all, 2 updates. One, Shmerdakov is actually Ivar the Boneless, okay? This is your Brothers Karamazov update, if that's not clear. Shmerdakov is actually Ivar the Boneless. I'm having to reanalyze my thoughts on the Sons of Ragnar with the sons of Fyodor Karamazov, but I feel like I'm still onto something here. I could write a 20-page paper on how Vikings, the television show, is a retelling of the Brothers Karamazov, but literally, I am reading some of the most incendiary literature that has ever been written. I know that people are constantly on about the fact this is the best book that's ever been written, but oh my gosh, they were right. I mean, I'm reading something right now, chills. I mean, I was moved almost to tears. Incredible. And I am now about to read the chapter, The Grand Inquisitor. Wish me luck. It's been fun to update on Instagram, and I thought to myself, why am I not filming a vlog around this? And I wanted to, but I just felt like it would get really, really long. So I'm just going to call this a weekly reading vlog. And if we finish the Brothers Karamazov this week, that's great. And it can be my Brothers Karamazov vlog in a way. I really am genuinely just blown away by some of the concepts here, though. Whether I feel it's disjointed or not, and whether I feel there was a proper lead up to the conversation or not, I really think the kind of philosophical debates that are ongoing in this are genuinely some of the most fascinating pieces of literature that I've ever had the privilege of reading. This is incendiary to me. And frankly, I'm wondering about the initial publication here. I just imagined that this was a hard book to sell. There's so much about it that's genuinely fascinating to me. And I'll tell you right now, my favorite brother, I feel like you'll judge me on this. I feel like saying who your favorite brother is kind of like admitting to what you also believe, but that's not necessarily true in my case. I just really like Ivan. I think Ivan is my favorite of the children of Fyodor Karamazov, and I just really, really love him. I liked him initially because he was very quiet and he had nothing to say, and Dmitri was the one I initially imprinted on, who was the oldest child, and he is so ridiculous and so dumb 90% of the time that I can't stand him. Alyosha has similar problems to me. He's just not interesting. I'm going to go on and say it. I feel like that's controversial, but to me, he is just a vehicle for conversation, but he has no thoughts of his own. I feel like he's just parroting what others have said to him, and 9 times out of 10, he says nothing. So when he does speak to me, it's not like he's talking about his own ideas. I feel like he truly is the main character that is just a concept and not necessarily a character on his own. To me, at least, the other characters, whether you like them or not, they're doing something interesting. I don't necessarily feel like Alyosha has done anything interesting thus far, and we're almost halfway through the book. To me, Ivan, though, Ivan is the diamond in the rough. I'm blown away by Ivan, and a lot of it is because there was this passage where he was talking about this hunger for life that he has, and I just thought it was really, really wonderful. Yes, okay. Here we are. He says, I have a longing for life, and I go on living in spite of logic. Though I may not believe in the order of the universe, yet I love the sticky little leaves as they open in spring. I love the blue sky. I love some people whom one loves, you know, sometimes without knowing why. I love some great deeds done by men, though I've long ceased perhaps to have faith in them, yet from old habit one's heart prizes them. And he's actually trying to leave. He's trying to travel, and basically people keep holding him up. But he says, yet I know that I am only going to a graveyard, but it's a most precious graveyard. That's what it is. Precious are the dead that lie there. Every stone over them speaks of such burning life in the past, of such passionate faith in their work, their truth, their struggle, and their science, that I know I shall fall on the ground and kiss those stones and weep over them, though I'm convinced in my heart that it's long been nothing but a graveyard. And I shall not weep from despair, but simply because I shall be happy in my tears. I shall steep my soul in my emotion. I love the sticky leaves in spring, the blue sky. That's all it is. It's not a matter of intellect or logic. It's loving with one's inside, with one's stomach. I really, really love him. But my favorite quote in this book, I'm not tabbing this, and I really should be, honestly, but I have been highlighting. That's kind of been my annotation system this time. But here is my favorite quote. God and the devil are fighting there, and the battlefield is the heart of man, but a man only talks of his own ache. I mean, he was cooking when he wrote that. God and the devil are fighting there, and the battlefield is the heart of man, but a man only talks of his own ache. I mean, he took us to church with that one. And talk about taking me to church, I just read the incredible Grand Inquisitor chapter. I wish I had been filming myself. I mean, I cried reading it. It was unbelievable to me. Unbelievable. I mean, genuinely, the quotes in it, insane. And it was basically like the idea that Jesus came back and walked among us during the Spanish Inquisition, and he was being interrogated by an inquisitor, because what he does is something that would have been targeted by the Spanish Inquisition. And it was just insane to me. And at one point, the Grand Inquisitor admitted that he doesn't really work for Jesus. He doesn't really work for God, because they're talking about when Jesus was tempted in the desert. Jesus was offered three things. And he says, we are not working with thee, but with him. That is our mystery. It's long, 8 centuries, since we have been on his side and not on thine. Just 8 centuries ago, we took from him what thou didst reject with scorn, the last gift he offered thee, showing thee all the kingdoms of the earth. We took from him Rome and the sword of Caesar, and proclaimed ourselves sole rulers of the earth, though hitherto we have not been able to complete our work. But whose fault is that? Oh, the work is only beginning, but it has begun. I mean, chills. Unbelievable. I mean, genuinely, it was unbelievable. It was so moving. And there was just like this whole argument before he tells this story. Ivan is the one who's telling the Grand Inquisitor story, and he had this whole entire speech beforehand where he was talking about the fact that he believes in God, but he can't process God's world because of harm done to innocents. And that's really one of the big arguments of all time. How does a benevolent God let this happen? And there's always a discussion of sin and sin in each individual person. And he struggles with that, and he struggles with innocents suffering and no one helping them and no one taking that suffering on for them. And the discussion is that, of course, Jesus has taken on that suffering for them. I don't know. It's beautiful. It really is. So much of it feels like it kind of goes over my head, but the religious conversations here are so meaningful and so beautiful. I mean, genuinely, it is stunning to me. But I'll say, if you've not read this and you're curious about it, I feel like you need to have a good background in the Christian faith, in my opinion, in an understanding of what it's all about to even get what he's talking about. I'm not saying you have to be of faith, but I think you need to have a good basis in a lot of understandings of kind of the tenets of Christianity. And also, in general, some of the more famous stories from the Bible have come up time and time again in this. And I've often wondered while reading this first half, just how approachable this is to the modern reader or to the secular reader who maybe wasn't exposed to this. To me, if the book goes off the rails and they just talk about eating cookies for the next 500 pages, that's fine. The book is still going to get at least 4 stars from me because of the Grand Inquisitor chapter alone. That was beyond me. But literally the quote, God and the devil are fighting there and the battlefield is the heart of man, that is so metal. I mean, that is so hardcore. As always, the quotes are wonderful in Dostoevsky. I've had ups and downs with him over the past couple of years. I loved The Idiot. The Idiot I gave 5 stars. I semi-loved Crime and Punishment. It just hasn't stuck with me. I haven't thought on it a lot. I gave that 4 stars, I think. I really did not like Demons. I don't think I rated Demons, but I might have given that 2 stars. I really did not like that. And so I was kind of worried going into this one. I've had a lot of ups and downs with him, but I've also really loved his short fiction, so I should have had faith. But this is going to be, I think, the main goal this week. But I am reading some other books. I'll let you know how that goes if I get any further in them. I'm trying to tell myself to not read multiple things at one time, especially knowing when a lot is going on. I should try to finish one thing, and so I feel like I should try to focus on the Brothers Karamazov. Look at this cute charcuterie board from Walmart. I mean, it's everything to me. We also have this one, a Christmas tree, and it came with these bowls. Walmart's kind of killing it this holiday season. We also went to Target, but I feel like it needs no introduction for me to say that Target had literally nothing. I just wonder about people. Like when I watch influencers actually hauling stuff from Target and they have all this cute stuff, I'm like, where do you live? Whose Target actually has this stuff in the dollar spot? Not mine. But that's your little Christmas update. Tomorrow the oven is coming, and I might make some party mix. But you might can see by the fact that I'm wearing a sleeveless shirt, it's no longer chilly. It's back to being 80 degrees. I don't like it. I don't like it. But your reading update, I am now about 400 or so pages into the Brothers Karamazov. I'm still really enjoying it, but I'm going to say, I feel like I actually don't like the plot of the book because I feel like the plot is detracting from these really interesting conversations that are going on. And that to me is kind of the purpose of the novel. I don't know. I kind of, on the one hand, feel like this would work far better for me in a nonfiction format. But at the same time, I'm never that emotionally engaged in nonfiction. So I feel like fiction was the perfect vehicle for some of these ideas that he wants to explore. But to me, the conversations about philosophy, about religion, they are so much more interesting than anything else going on. And when we break in and we actually have something to do with the plot, I'm kind of like, oh gosh, I don't really want to read about this. And those are the times that I choose to put the book down. I know the second half is going to kind of pivot and go into kind of a courtroom drama, and I really enjoy that. I really enjoy those anyway, but I kind of wonder if when we pivot and we move into that world, are we going to lose what has made this first half so special? Because I'm now on book 3, I think. I think there are 4 books throughout the novel that the novel is broken up into. And so I feel like I'm definitely at what you would call the halfway point. Everything that I think I was excited about and that I knew to expect, that I knew to get excited about, that's over. That all happened in this first half. And so I'm kind of apprehensive about the second half. I'm going to go on though and give up the ghost a little bit because there's no way that I'm going to finish this book this week. And that's fine by me. In fact, I honestly think it's almost to the detriment of the book to try to read it straight through because some of these things you kind of want to sit and process. So I'm also currently reading a fantasy romance. I'm reading, is it Two Twisted Crowns or is that the second one? I'm finally reading that. I picked this up on a Kindle Daily Deal sometime last year. In fact, it may have been at Black Friday last year. Isn't that crazy? And this is a duology. The second book just came out, and that's why I think I'm confused on title. But I really love the idea of a duology. I really like the idea of 2 books and done. And I am really intrigued by this so far because this is a world where if you got sick as a child, this fever could possibly have given you magic. But the only other magic that exists in this world is basically in a deck of playing cards. And I cannot tell y'all enough how much I love playing cards. I love anything, any world building that has to do with cards. I just absolutely adore it. That's why I love Stephanie Garber. That's why I love Caraval and Once Upon a Broken Heart. Those are kind of tarot cards and people were locked inside a deck of tarot cards, essentially. I love Alice in Borderland, which is technically an adaptation of Alice in Wonderland, but they're trying to basically assemble a deck of cards and the suits stand in for certain challenges that they have to do. I just love cards. I just am obsessed with them. And so I really like this world. I think the magic system is super interesting. And our main character had this sickness as a child, and technically they should have killed her. They kill anyone who gets this sickness because no one should have magic. But her family, of course, hid her, as is always the case. And something that she has with her, she has kind of a voice in her head that's called the Nightmare. And he only speaks in riddles. He only speaks in rhyme. I also am a sucker for rhyme. I feel like this book was written for me. I feel like this book was just written for Jenny. And so I'm really enjoying this. It's good to have something kind of lighter on the go with something heavier. But at the same time, I do feel like I probably should focus on the Brothers Karamazov because the weeks are only going to get more hectic as we go up to Christmas, and I feel like less and less reading will probably get done. So I'm still going to try to focus on that. You are teetering very tepidly on this absolutely horrible selfie stick turned tripod that I have that I thought was going to make my life easier when I got it. And sadly, I have had complaints about it every step of the way. But it's a few days later, we got the oven, and So far, I like it. I cooked something in it today. I baked some cookies, and I think they turned out really well. So I'm really, really excited about the oven. It's a good thing to have it and to go on and have gotten it because it's getting into holiday baking season, and that's really important to me. In terms of reading, we really are nearing the end of the week, and so my goal was to try to at least finish something by the end of this 7-day period. And it's not going to be the Brothers Karamazov. I am still maybe at the halfway point a little bit. And I'll say we're getting to the point in this where I feel like things are dragging. This is the middle part of the book. And to me, always books of this length start to drag a little bit. And I start to question everything about myself at this point in the reading process. It's also hard because I know I say this a lot, but I often feel like if it takes me longer than a few days to read a book, I must not be that interested in it. And I mean that regardless of page count, regardless of the fact that a book is a classic or not. That normally is an indication for me that I'm struggling. And I looked back and I started this book 2 weeks ago. And I realized that I haven't given this my full attention, and that's fine. I really didn't intend to, and I also didn't intend to rush through it. But a couple of days ago, I reached a point with this where I just sat this down and haven't come back to it. But my mood has been kind of low this week, and I just have not felt like this was the book to be reading. I really have not felt like this was going to lift my mood. Sometimes it has, weirdly enough. Sometimes to me, the philosophical and religious discussions have actually been exactly what I needed to hear. But other times to me, this book is really depressing. And as we kind of move into the back half of November and basically into the downhill slope towards Thanksgiving, I have no idea when you're seeing this vlog. It might be after Thanksgiving, actually. So I just know that there's going to be less time moving forward to really fully dedicate to reading. And then it's like, it's kind of the end of the year. And so I feel like I'm going to be in crunch time and trying to finish all of these other books that I feel like I want to read before the end of the year. I don't want this to fall by the wayside, but I have to say in this midpoint, I am feeling just a little bit frustrated with it. If you want to know my honest opinion, I think it's very repetitive. To me, because the characters seem to kind of stand in for certain thought processes and certain ideologies, it means that they parrot the meanings of those ideologies again and again and again. And so it's gotten to the point when I know that certain characters are having a conversation, I kind of know the way that it's going to go. And I think it's interesting because in some ways, I think some of these characters are far more interesting than others. And the fact that, for example, Dmitri has not gotten a lot is really fascinating to me, when easily to me, he has to be the most interesting character. Ivan is really my favorite brother, and so to me, he's the most interesting. But I think from a plot standpoint, Dmitri has so much going on. And I mentioned this earlier, but Alyosha, the youngest, who I know is everyone's favorite, I'm genuinely sitting here kind of wondering why, because to me, of everyone and of all of the characters, to me, he is so clearly the plot device, if that makes sense. He is genuinely a vehicle for conversation so that other characters can kind of spout their beliefs and he just kind of nod along and say something at the very end. I understand that Alyosha kind of stands in for Dostoevsky's young son that died very early in his life and who was also named Alyosha. And so he's kind of been given all of these really incredibly positive qualities, and he's basically the Mary Sue of the book. Everyone loves him, despite the fact that he really seems like just a blank wall. And maybe that's the point. Maybe we're supposed to kind of self-insert with Alyosha, or we're supposed to kind of put the features of someone we like and we love on him. But I think in general, he's just the most boring character of the book. I'm sorry to say that. And it's interesting to say that when talking about Dostoevsky, when I have read another book by him that is my favorite of his. This book is not going to beat it, and that's The Idiot. And I know a lot of people are frustrated with the main character, Prince Mishkin, in The Idiot, because he's just like good to a fault. He has no flaw. He really is just a sweet, kind, caring, really, really wonderful individual. And I would say that Alyosha is kind of like him, but it just felt so much more genuine to me in The Idiot. And it felt like Prince Mishkin really was a character. and he was reacting to things around him. And that was kind of the plot of the book, was that people thought he was boring, or people thought he was uninteresting, or that he must be stupid for being good all the time. To me, no one really analyzes why Alyosha is the way that he is. And I think that's what's kind of boring to me. There's even a little bit of an arrogant quality to some of what Alyosha has said in his head, like, oh, I know nobody's going to hurt me because everyone loves me. And I'm like, why though? Why do they? Because really, what do you have going for you in terms of personality? Besides being a monk and being objectively a nice person, and he does care about people, I would say, especially people that he doesn't really know. But it's just interesting to me that like every character interaction he has is somebody saying, I just absolutely adore you. I love you so much. And like, you could never say anything to make me hate you. And I'm like, well, he's really not said anything at all, one way or another. I'm definitely going to continue forward with this. I just think it's going to be slower going than I wanted it to be. I do feel like, really though, when I think about it, I kind of have plowed through this at a relatively fast pace, which I'm kind of happy about, because I really did want to get through this while I had some time. And I think that I'm going to enjoy this second half, because I think I'm really going to enjoy the courtroom drama. But to me, I think the more interesting religious discussions are possibly over, and that's kind of a shame. So the other book I am reading is One Dark Window. I have no idea why I could not come up with that name in the last clip. You know, literally, I have no idea why I could not think of the name of that book, and I don't know why that's a struggle I seem to have in nearly every reading vlog now, but I'm reading One Dark Window, and I am almost halfway through this, and I'm obsessed. Just obsessed. And a lot of it has to do with the world. I want to say I feel like the characters are secondary to the world building here, because I think this world building is really interesting, and it's kind of spooky in a way. It's kind of eerie, which I think is really, really working for the type of story the author wants to tell. But I also think is just kind of unique. I think I read a lot of books that claim that they're gothic, and they really aren't. They don't even nail the atmosphere. And for me, this book 100% is about atmosphere. Like, part of this world has a mist that encroaches on people, and you can get lost in the mist, and it will cause you to die, or you'll go crazy out in the mist. And so I just really like the idea of like castles coming out of this fog and pathways that lead nowhere. I just really love the idea of the world. I do think the characters are interesting. I am intrigued by the romance, but I'll say this book is flying by really fast, whereas I feel like the Brothers Karamazov is taking me a really long time to read. Like, I feel like I could sit down and read an hour of that and make it through 10 pages. I feel like reading for 10 minutes of One Dark Window, I've made it through somehow 10% of the book. So I don't know if the book is really short or if it's just really fast paced. But one thing I'll say against it is that I do think the writing style is relatively confusing. I have found myself going back and rereading passages multiple times. And in the first couple of chapters, when you're just getting to know people and you're just getting to know the world, I think that's understandable. But to me, almost halfway through, to still have to be doing that is really kind of strange to me. So I feel like there is kind of a confusing quality to the writing style that's maybe not necessarily the best, but I just am loving the world. I think this is kind of the ideal book to be reading when it's getting cold outside, when it's getting dark early. I feel like it's really atmospheric, and I kind of hate that I missed reading it during the Halloween season, but it is such an ideal autumnal book. I also am finishing up a book for Nonfiction November, but I'm just gonna save that and do kind of a Nonfiction November style wrap up, because I feel like I'm reading a lot of great books for that. And so I think I'll just do an entire video where I recommend these books, because I think there's been some stellar nonfiction coming out, especially in the past month. And this is a new release that I'm about to finish, and I'm just really, really loving it. So I am reading all over the board. That's definitely why I haven't made any more progress in the Brothers Karamazov, but I am still really enjoying it. It's just getting to the point where, to me, it's dragging a little bit, but I think I feel this way at nearly the midpoint of all books, and it doesn't even necessarily have to do with their length, but definitely I can feel that here. It's funny because you would think with a book that was serialized, there would constantly be cliffhangers or something like that to try to keep you engaged and make you want the next part. I don't necessarily feel like the Brothers Karamazov has had that at all. And again, if you want to know my honest opinion, I don't feel like the Brothers Karamazov has really truly been about a plot, period. And I think going into this book expecting this to be like a murder mystery is incredibly misleading, because the first half does not really have anything to do with that at all. And I think if you go into this book with that expectation, or expecting like Crime and Punishment 2.0, that's not really what this is. In some ways, it's dealing with like the psychological components of Crime and Punishment, and those were the parts of Crime and Punishment that were interesting. And so I think if you liked that, you're going to like this. But if what you liked about Crime and Punishment was kind of the violent self-introspection, that is really not present here to me whatsoever. So I just think it's interesting that across his career he had so many vastly different novels, and some of them I have really truly loved and some of them I have not. And so it's just interesting. I really do think there's a Dostoevsky out there for everybody. And this is going to be up there for me, but it is just not The Idiot. I just fell in love with The Idiot chapter 1. There was something about it. And I feel like this book is trying to talk about similar topics to The Idiot. I just feel like The Idiot, and it might be because it was so much shorter, I feel like it was a tighter story and it had such a clear thesis that the book built around. To me, I'm wondering through this, like, what's the point? Other than brotherhood, which I would say is a really large theme, is like family and brotherhood on a larger scale. It's not just the Karamazov brothers and how they react to one another and react to their father. It's also about the brotherhood of humanity and how you relate to your fellow man. And one of the big themes has also been, can you truly love your neighbor, which is one of the 10 commandments. And so many characters have said that's basically impossible to do. The one thing that God has called us to do is to love others, and specifically to love our neighbors. And that's the most impossible thing to do, because the more you get to know someone, the less you like them. And so you can kind of love a group, or you can say like, I love mankind. But when it gets down on the individual level, you have a much harder time of that. And that's interesting. And I would say that also was a theme in The Idiot. And it was also a theme in Crime and Punishment. Crime and Punishment was a little bit like, I'm doing this for the greater good. I'm doing this for society. And that's kind of what's being talked about here. It's interesting. All of his books are in conversation, but they're all so vastly different from one another. And apparently I should revisit Demons, but my gosh, that was just not for me. And I really don't feel like forcing myself to get back to it. But those are all of my thoughts currently. The week is officially over. In fact, we are starting next week. It's actually Monday. So I feel like it's the prime time to finish up this vlog. And kind of in the nick of time, I actually did finish a book last night, which was One Dark Window. No, it wasn't the Brothers Karamazov, but that's okay. So I just basically hit the halfway mark with this one, and I really, really wanted to finish it. I was super excited about it. I don't know what it was about this that it just instantly got me. I know I said in earlier clips, to me, the charm of this one was entirely within the world, and I think that remained true. I really don't necessarily feel like the characters backed up the really interesting world building. I don't think they were that interesting on their own. I think I was kind of kept going by just how much I really enjoyed the world, but frankly, it ended with such a crazy ending, such a crazy cliffhanger. I was so glad that I waited until the second book was out, because now I can finish out the duology. And that's going to be my goal between now and the end of the year. I am really going to try to finish out at least a couple of series that I have on the go. Things that I know I have only 1 or 2 books left in are going to be my priority. But I just really did love this. I loved the vibes. I loved the atmosphere. I just felt like it was kind of an ideal November book. And I feel like looking back, when I think on years past, especially here on BookTube, November tends to be one of my favorite months of the year in terms of reading. I tend to get a lot of reading done, and I also tend to really enjoy the books that I wind up picking up in November. I think it's only been maybe once in the 5 years that I have been on BookTube where I had like a poor reading month in November. For the most part, it's been really positive. And so I find myself kind of getting excited when November kicks off, because I know I'm going to be really excited by what I'm reading. There's just something about the month that I think means I tend to pick up books that I'm really going to enjoy. I think the fact that it's kind of sandwiched between October, which is very themed reading in terms of Victober and Halloween, and also December, where you're kind of thinking about the end of the year and you're trying to finish things out and you kind of feel pressure to get things finished. I think November kind of has a nice chill vibe, and I've also been reading some really great nonfiction for Nonfiction November this year. I'm just going to save that for its own video, but I feel like One Dark Window was extremely unique among a lot of the fantasy books that I have been reading this year, especially fantasy romance, if I'm thinking objectively about fantasy romance. Though, if you want to know the honest truth, to me, this book is not necessarily fantasy romance, and I think we've gotten to the point that we're calling any fantasy that has a female main character and includes romance as a prominent role in the plot. I think everyone is just calling that fantasy romance. To me, that's not what this book is. This book has a lot going on outside of the romance. Yes, the romance was there, but to me it was not the main point of the book at all. And it also wasn't even the main point of the main character's story. So I feel like that kind of does the book a disservice. And if you're someone who really is a romance fan, I don't know that this book included enough romance to really intrigue you, but what was there I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the characters. They just didn't really stand out to me. That's really why this book got a 4 and not a 5. That's what really separated the rating for me. I just didn't feel like the characters were there in a way that I really felt was memorable. I can already tell it's only been 24 hours since I finished it. I'm not really going to remember these characters. And it's interesting to say that at the same time as reading the Brothers Karamazov. These were really great books to be reading side by side, because the Brothers Karamazov is good, especially when you're reading it, but like most classics for me, it's not a page turner. So it's not necessarily a book I'm dying to get back into. But I think the faults of both of these books are kind of the same, which is just that the characters are really not there for me. And I feel like in the Brothers Karamazov, I feel like it's weird and it's hard to do anytime you really do want to critique a classic, because to me, I would say this of any book that was published today and I wouldn't feel bad about it, but knowing that something has become like a classic of the Western canon, that always makes you feel the pressure when you want to say that something wasn't perfect. But certainly this book is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But the one thing keeping me going here is the idea that these characters are not even really intended to be fully fledged characters in their own right. And that's kind of fine by me, that the book just wants to have kind of larger philosophical conversations. But then to me, the plot needs to keep up with that. And so far, I am now 500 pages in. The plot has finally gotten interesting, but to me, it's just so kind of incongruous. And I have to hope that the last few chapters and the last couple hundred pages really tie everything together, because I do really feel like now that I've gotten to the midway point, this is dragging. But again, when I think about other Dostoevsky books that I have read, the characters stand out for me. Not so much here at all. To me, this is all about concept and this is about idea. And I feel like One Dark Window was also more so about the world and the magic system than it was about the characters. And that's fine if you're that type of reader. But for the most part, I actually really do need a character to latch onto. And like I said, I did really love the characters of One Dark Window, and I feel like I'm going to get more attached to them in the second book. So I am interested to move forward into that, and I am just gonna wrap up the vlog here. It's okay, I didn't finish the Brothers Karamazov, but that's fine. We are getting ready to go into the week of Thanksgiving, and I assume when you see this, Thanksgiving is probably over. It's probably the week of Thanksgiving. So I wanted to film a separate reading vlog for that, and I already have some ideas about what I want to read next. But I hope that you enjoyed this reading vlog. I would love to know your thoughts on these two books down below. What did you think of them, and what are you currently reading? But that's going to be all from me today. I hope you're all having a great week. Happy reading. Goodbye.